Okay, just completed turn number 14, January 1943. So, going to be heading into July 43 here in a few minutes. And a lot of action this turn number 14. And the fortunes of war have turned against the Axis pretty significantly. Both the Allies and the Comintern both made significant gains against the Axis powers. So still maybe a little too early to tell how things are going to exactly turn out. But after this round here, I'm thinking that the best chance the Axis have for a victory is going to be based on victory points. And even then, they've got to hope that the war ends sooner based on the die rolls here. We're coming up, I believe it's the July 44 turn where you start rolling to see if the war ends at that point, and each subsequent turn a greater chance of the war ending, based on the die roll. So I think that's going to probably be the best chance for an Axis victory at this point. So things were looking really good, and then the Allies and the Comintern both gambled a little bit, and it really paid off. So first, on the Russian front, as you can see here, there's almost no German units left at all in Russia. So the Germans had went ahead and they bought some mechanized infantry they placed down here in East Germany. They also bought some Stukas and fighter. So what happened was Germany had brought everything together into this territory here, southern Belarusia. So they had about 45 total units there, like 10 self-propelled artillery, 7 towed artillery, 16 medium armor, and like 11 or 13, something like that, motorized infantry. And Germany does have advanced artillery, so all 17 of their artillery pieces defended at a 4. So was thinking that maybe that was enough to dissuade the Russians from attacking, but the Russians didn't want to just sit back and let the Axis continue to get stronger. So they rolled the dice and they came into southern Belarusia, and they came in with just 40 units. And actually, the total number of die on the Russian attack was around 200, and I think that was pretty much what the German defense dice were about 200. So it was about even in that sense, and Germany had like 5 more units, but the Russians rolled really well. They brought in like 12 medium armor, 3 heavy armor, a couple of fighters, 6 tactical bombers, 3 light tanks and infantry, and 5 self-propelled artillery. And as you can see, they took Belarusia, southern Belarusia. They had the 3 heavy armor left, and they still had 5 of the tacticals left as well. So they took it rather significantly, and that wiped out that huge territory worth of German units. And that was pretty much everything. Germany had everything built up into that one territory, hoping to dissuade the Russians from attacking so they could keep inching closer to Moscow, and now those plans are done. The Germans do have like 5 medium armor and about 8 fighters in Lithuania, and they got a cavalry and a infantry just down in southern Russia, and that is it. And they don't have really much coming behind it. Now, they do have a decent air force in Romania, a couple of Stukas, a couple of fighters, and a medium bomber. They do have the 3 Stukas they purchased this last turn. They can probably just reach. They might be able to take out these heavy Russian tanks. But even the 5 mechs they put down last turn, you only can move 2 turns, 2 spaces a turn. So it's going to take a couple of turns just to get into Russia with those. So, and that's not going to be nearly enough to do much of anything. So Germany's really in trouble on the Eastern Front. They're going to probably have to devote pretty much all their money for several turns to come now, trying to build some kind of force back up. The Russians don't have a lot left. They mostly have infantry. So I don't really see the Russians, pushing into, German-held territory too much, especially in Poland. Germany will be able to react to that. Plus, like I said, they do have significant air assets that can move, 4 to 5 spaces a turn, depending on if they're flying from an airfield or not. So, because of that, Germany still has some offensive strength with their air force, but probably the dreams of taking Moscow are pretty much shot at this point. It would have to take some incredibly lucky rolls for Germany to end up taking out Russia. It's going to probably be just a stalemate there. And then that also affects other things too, because now Germany, because they're going to have to spend pretty much all their money on, sending units to the Eastern Front, they really can't spend any more money on their Navy. They still have this stack of 16 subs that are making their way into the Atlantic. So that's definitely a problem for the Allies. But something the Allies can counter, and they've already started to. So that was another thing. These 16 subs moved out a couple of spaces, so they're ready to start, maybe convoying in the Atlantic or taking out some British ships that happen to be within range. So that was it for Germany. Russia, we already talked about what they did. They bought men. They put 5 men back down into Kursk. They put 5 men in Stalingrad. And they put a couple of medium armor in Moscow. So Russia seems pretty secure right now, and the Comintern in general doing really well. As far as the British and the Americans in Europe, they also have contributed to the Axis woes on this turn number 14. So now Germany's not the only Axis power on this side of the globe that finds themselves in trouble. The Italians now are also starting to get stretched thin and getting hit from a bunch of different directions. So for the British, they came down 2 spaces with this navy here and landed in Morocco. So they took that. And they had taken a Vichy territory earlier, so Vichy was activated on Germany's side now as an active combatant in the war. British had come up and taken Nubia back. They had a couple of infantry, or 3 infantry, I believe, and 6 medium armor. So they were right at the doorstep to Egypt. Their entire air force is sitting here in the Sudan. That's 4 tacticals, 2 fighters, a medium bomber, and a strategic bomber. So Italy had no choice. They had to come down here into Nubia and take out those ground units so that at least East Egypt is safe and secure for a few turns. So they did take out that. So that was a pretty good victory for the Italians, taking out those British ground forces. They did lose 4 infantry and a fighter in the process, so they weren't able to actually take that territory back. But at least now the British do not have any ground units at all in Africa besides what they just landed here on the west coast. So Cairo's safe for the time being. But then the U.S. followed up the British landing with their own landing. They came and landed in Tunisia, which the Italians had taken because it was an empty territory. They had taken it on their portion of the turn, and the U.S. took that right back, killed off the 1 Italian infantry, and now they're in Tunisia with 6 infantry, 3 medium armor, and 3 artillery, and their entire fleet moved into the Med with it. So that sea zone is just stacked full of British and U.S. ships. So the U.S. Has gotten into the action in the Mediterranean. The U.S. also put down 5 more destroyers off the coast of New York here. So now that's a stack of 10 destroyers and a light cruiser. So that's already approaching enough forces to deal with the 16 German subs that are coming out. So that's why I also meant that Germany's not going to probably have a whole lot of success in the Atlantic, just because they can't afford to spend any more money on ships with how disastrous the last turn was for them on the Eastern Front. So it's probably just a matter of another turn or two, and the U.S. will, and maybe with the British as well, have enough destroyers in the Atlantic to take out that stack of German subs. And now, with transports and all these ground units in North Africa, the Americans and the British can land pretty much anywhere. So that puts Italy in a real bind here. They had to spend pretty much all their money on infantry. They did buy two fighters and 6 infantry they put in North Italy, and then they had to move some more infantry down into Rome. So North Italy has 6 infantry, 2 fighters. Rome has 6 infantry and a mountain infantry. And the British really can't take Rome or North Italy. They only have these 4 ground units, these 4 infantry here. But the Americans with 6 infantry, 3 medium armor, and the 3 artillery definitely are a threat to the Italian mainland. Now, the Italians do still have a bunch of air units in North Africa they can pull back. They've got 2 stacks of fighters, which are about 7 total, and 4 tactical bombers. But then, besides the Italian mainland being in danger, then you also have to worry about the British and the Americans being able to land anywhere in North Africa. The Americans even can come over and land in East Egypt this turn. They're only 1 sea zone away, so they can hit anywhere. They could even land in the Balkans, Greece, Yugoslavia. They can pretty much land anywhere. So the Axis are in real trouble in the Mediterranean. The Germans will bring down these subs, and they can move 3 spaces because of the major ports. So they can go 1, 2, 3. So they'll be off the coast of Portugal this next turn. But at the same on that same turn, the U.S. can bring these destroyers out 1, 2, 3, and maybe even peel off some of the units here in the Med, and probably take out those German subs before they can even reach the Mediterranean. That'd be 10 destroyers there. Another 3 destroyers are here, along with a tactical and a fighter. So that's probably going to be enough to take out the 16 subs. They don't defend all that great. I think they defend at a 3 maybe. So those German subs might not even be able to get to the Mediterranean to help out the Italians. So some real dangers for the Axis across the board in Europe. In the Pacific, it wasn't as disastrous of a turn. The Japanese doing a couple of things, not really a lot. They continue to pull back into Rihe. They've been expelled from every Chinese territory except for 1 at this point. So that's another problem for the Axis. The Communist Chinese probably within a turn or 2 are going to start getting into some of this originally held Japanese territory in Manchuria. So that's not good. But the South Pacific is pretty secure. Japan came over, peeled off part of the fleet that was in the Philippines, came over here, landed in this little island of Ceylon. Wasn't worth any money, but they had the fighter that was on this light carrier fly out and take out the Far East Command transport. So now at least Japan has no worries that the Far East Command can kind of start scooping up these money islands back from them, because the Far East Command has no transports. So that was a positive for the Japanese. They didn't want to take the fleet in the Philippines and send it towards the Americans. And then, like I said, with that 1 transport, the Far East Command could have started taking back some of these money islands. So at least those are secure for the time being for Japan. They also moved a transport, and a destroyer took 2 infantry and 1 light armor total. And they have another mini fleet here in the Philippines. Also, 2 light carriers came down. So the Japanese actually here in the South Pacific can start posing some problems to the Far East Command. They've got altogether 2 transports and a destroyer that can move 3 infantry, a motorized infantry, and a light tank. And then with the 3 light carriers, they have 3 fighters. Plus, they have a bunch of ships here that can shore bombard, some heavy cruisers, a battle cruiser. So the Japanese can now start threatening to land maybe in India somewhere, not Calcutta. The Far East Command responded by building, 3 infantry. So they've got a stack of about 6 infantry, 2 medium armor, 3 fighters, and a couple tactical. So Calcutta itself isn't in any danger, but the Japanese could come back into British Malaya. They could maybe land over here in East India. So giving the Far East Command something to think about down there. The Japanese also finished off 2 more Yamato-class battleships and 2 light cruisers, and they bought 3 transports. So Japan's thinking is they're going to probably go and buy a bunch of ground units this next turn so these 3 transports can start moving stuff around. Maybe add some defenses to the Money Islands, maybe land back in China or Southeast Asia. So a few options. They wanted to get some transports on the board to be able to move some stuff around. And again, all these units are here in this sea zone 56 that's just so crowded you can't put everything there. So altogether, Japan has a huge fleet there. That's 5 heavy battleships, 2 fleet carriers, 2 light carriers, a coastal sub, 3 transports, 3 subs, 2 regular battleships, 4 light cruisers, and 2 destroyers. So a significant fleet in Japanese home waters. Japan's in no danger of being invaded anytime soon. And I doubt that, depending on how long the game goes, I don't think Japan really will have that much to worry about pretty much for the entirety of the game, just the way things are looking. Now, they could have came over and attacked the U.S. fleet in Hawaii, and the U.S. didn't have this many units here in Hawaii. Some of those moved on the U.S. turn. And Japan probably could have taken them out with what they had here in the Japanese home waters, and some of the units from the Philippines could have came over and backed them up as well. They couldn't have quite reached, the ships couldn't have quite reached, but the planes from the light carriers could have attacked too. The problem is that Japan wouldn't have had much left probably from the victory. And then the U.S. had decent naval forces over here off the west coast of the United States that would have been able to counterattack and finish off probably what was left of the Japanese fleet. So then, the Japanese would have really gained nothing and lost most of their fleet in the process. Now, the U.S. also would have been, severely decimated, but then also that would have pulled the Philippine fleet over towards the U.S. and left the Money Islands all exposed to the Far East Command with the single transport they had. So that was why Japan decided to go over to take out the Far East Command transport and decline to attack the U.S. fleet in Hawaii. So then the U.S. on their turn moved some more units in there. So the U.S. also has a massive fleet in Hawaiian waters. That's, I believe, 7 or 8 regular battleships, 5 heavy cruisers, about 10 light cruisers, 3 destroyers, 2 fleet carriers, and a light carrier. And they also have 2 battleships right behind off of San Francisco. So it's kind of like a showdown. Who's going to blink first? It might be kind of a repeat of the battle on the Eastern Front where both the Germans and Russians had built up so much that one of them is going to take a chance and see what happens. I think right now the U.S. actually, even with the 5 heavy Japanese battleships, I think the U.S. has enough in Hawaii that they'd be able to take out that Japanese fleet. So Japan will probably defer from attacking again anytime soon. The U.S. put down 3 fleet carriers, so they're definitely building up a sizable carrier force. Japan didn't put any new ships down on the production chart this turn after they went ahead and paid off the ships that were currently on the chart. They spent the rest of their money on those transports and a couple of men. So for the next couple of turns, Japan's only going to be able to purchase naval units and put them immediately on the board that don't require multi-stage is on the production chart. So Japan's looking at basically destroyers and subs if they want to continue to add naval assets on the board each turn right now. And they also lost money in China, so they're down to just $31 plus bonuses. So not sure how many more of these expensive ships they can afford to put on the production chart. As far as the communist Chinese, this was the other half of the Comintern that had a really good turn. They went ahead and took 2 Japanese-held territories in North China. So there's just Peking left that's under Japanese control, and that'll fall this turn. It's an empty territory. They also just continue to move all their units up into North China, so they've got all together within a couple territories of Japan. They've got about 15 infantry and about 7 artillery, so they're about to push into original held Japanese territory. They also influenced the last warlord to join them, and they also have evolved to a major power. They have land territory that totals $13, which is what they need to evolve to a major power. And then they have access to, new units and factories and all that. So the communist Chinese are about to, become a real thorn in Japan's side. Who knows? Maybe even the communist Chinese will turn on the Allies and think about coming down into Southeast Asia. We'll see how that plays out. The one thing that Japan does have, because of the transports they bought and the fact that the communist Chinese have moved pretty much all their forces up into North China, is all of these territories down here in central China are completely empty. So Japan could land in some of these territories on the next turn or two and start taking some of that money back. They could even land in Hong Kong. That's probably probable for a move this next turn is to land in Hong Kong. So Japan does have a few options with their forces. As far as the technology goes, a lot of stage 4 techs have been completed. As far as the Axis go, Germany has 4 complete. Japan has 4 complete. The Italians 2. So not too bad. Income-wise, Germany's still strong at 60 plus bonuses, which includes their wartime money they roll for. Japan's in decent shape at 31, and Italy's at 15, kind of holding steady there. And then as far as the Allies and the Comintern tech, the U.S. has 4, Britain's completed 4, Russia 3, and they have a bunch on the stage 3 portion of the tech chart. Money-wise, the U.S. is up there at $62 plus bonuses, so they're bringing in the most money per turn, unless the Germans get like a really good roll for wartime economy, but they're about even, roughly, maybe the U.S. by a little bit. Russia's in good shape at 44, Britain's hanging in there at 23, and then 14 for Far East Command, 13 for the Communist Chinese. So we'll see how things go heading into turn number 15, July 1940.